someone who doesn't feel like the sun signs you're supposed to be compatible with have ever been interesting to you. And number one, first reason will be you need to look at where your sun falls. All right, so let's imagine we're looking at a birth chart, and I'm assuming that you understand birth charts. Okay, so I'm not going to do a tutorial on what a birth chart is right now. Let's assume, we'll use me as an example. I'm a Libra sun, okay? Over here, this might be backwards, but let's pretend like this is the second house, okay? My sun falls in the second house, which then means those signs I'm supposed to be compatible with, which would be the other air signs, such as Gemini and Aquarius, are going to fall for me in houses that are also earthy houses. So Geminis will fall, or actually I'm sorry, Aquarius types will fall here in my 6th house. Geminis fall up here. They fall sort of in my 10th house, and some of them fall into my 11th house. And the Aquariuses fall slightly in my 6th house, and some of them fall in my 7th house. So what's interesting here is, and then Libras, of course, Libras fall in my 2nd house mostly. Libras, I've had relationships. I was married to a Libra for 13 years, so he fell into my 2nd house, which is that Taurus house, that house that desires connection, it desires stability. We had a very traditional marriage. We were married for 13 years, had 4 kids. I was a stay-at-home mom, did that whole kind of Taurus version of relating. And that's how my relationships to Libras have been. They usually go very quickly from being friends to being an actual committed relationship, okay? All of the Aquariuses, I have never been in a relationship with an Aquarius, okay? And I've never been romantically attracted to an Aquarius. Aquariuses fall, for the most part, into my 6th house. This is a house that has to do with duty. It's kind of it's the Virgo house. It has to do with sort of the earthly day-to-day tasks and habits, and has to do with health and these kinds of things. Not super sexy, okay? What's interesting, I've had a lot of Aquarius best friends who have fell into my 7th house, which is traditionally the house of partnership. So we had connected to like marriage. It's not, 7th house to me is not a romantic house necessarily. This is the house where we've moved through the houses at the bottom half of the birth chart or of the, of the wheel. And we are now moved into the top half, which has to do with relating to other people and to the outer world. 7th house is the very beginning of that. So it's your best friend as a child. It's your first boyfriend or girlfriend. It is your marriage partner. It's your business partner. And it's even your open enemy, someone that you're going to court, plaintiff defendant kind of a relationship, okay? And it's also, as an astrologer, that's the 7th house. I'm a counselor, and I sit with a client, and we sit one-on-one, and we talk. So it's these one-on-one relating with one another. But see, it's not romantic. It's not sexy. It's not like juicy. It's just that you're coming together and harmonizing and making things all nice between two people, okay? So Aquarius has never been, I've had many best friends. I love Aquarius personality types, but it's never been romantic for me. If the sun falls into Gemini, and then if the person's sun is in Gemini, then their sun sign will fall typically into my 10th house and a little bit into my 11th house. It's kind of split. It's a little bit of both. And just Geminis for me too, same. The 10th house is the house of business. And I have actually had several business relationships with Gemini types. We'll sit and have these great ideas and these conversations about sort of the plan we're going to develop together, how we're going to break it down, how we're going to, all the possibilities. I've got a great friend who counsels me and gives me great advice, and he has all these ideas, these sales ideas, and it's just like this multiplicity of ideas. Okay, that's the Gemini energy. But the majority of people fall in my 11th house, if I'm remembering correctly. Most of the Geminis fall in the 11th house, that house of friendship. It's actually Gemini and Cancer, so I'm sorry. I take that back. It's really pretty evenly split. But a lot of Geminis fall in that 11th house, at least the ones that I have known in my life and had personal experiences with. So it's this house of friendship, and it's an air house. It's not it is an inherently cerebral house. It's not an emotional, romantic, sexy, hot house. And so you've got to look at where your sun falls, and then you've got to look at where those trining in other words, those suns that are compatible with yours, where they're going to fall in your chart, because that means that person will activate that part of your psyche. For me, Aquariuses activate either the part of me that has to do with kind of the daily duties, or sort of, actually it's been people that I work out with, like the house of exercise. People that I, or I've had these ongoing relationships with, where it's one where I'm sort of counseling them on how to get in shape, or they fall into my house of partnership, just like a friendship. It's a platonic kind of a thing. Or if they're Gemini, they're falling in this 11th house, which is this house of friendship and associations and, the group collective freedom and this kind of thing. So it's really important if you want to see the sizzle. For me, I like to look at the moon. So my moon is in Aries, but it's in the Scorpio house. So my moon has kind of this steamy, my emotional nature has kind of a steamy quality to it. I need emotionally a partner who has some depth. I like more of someone who's introverted, who keeps things to themselves, because that's the Scorpio part of me that wants to get it out of them, to dive deep. And that's very attractive to me on an instinctive and an emotional level. So it's very important that when we talk about sun sign compatibility, we're not necessarily talking about like the relationship overall working or not. It's just that initial sort of dynamic between the two people. If you really want to see how the two people will live together and love together, you look at their moons, you look at their Venuses, how they'll enjoy time together. If they have the same things bring them both pleasure. If you've got two people whose moons are happy, but say their Venuses aren't in compatible zodiac signs, or if they're not in compatible zodiac signs, by the way, look at the houses they're in. Because you could have two Venuses or moons or Marses that are in kind of different, signs that aren't really talking to each other. But if you've got, let's say for example, Cancer Venus in the 10th house, in that Capricorn house, and then you've got someone who's got, let's say, Capricorn Mars, but it's in a water house. Let's say it's in the Pisces house. Do you see there's some communication that's happening there? And that's not a great example because Cancer and Capricorn are opposite each other. But anyway, house placement is really important. Now, first of all, sun sign compatibility, astrologers, we recognize the sun sign is really general. It's something that, while yes, it's going to give you an initial kind of, if these two people are going to be marching to the beat of a drum at the same rhythm, it doesn't give you much more than that, okay? You could have these two people in a marching band but wearing totally different costumes and playing instruments that are playing different songs even though they're marching together, okay? So what we want to look at, besides what I talked about in that first video, look at the moons. I always say look at the moon. The moon of the two people will show you their instinct, their mood nature, their emotional nature, how they will love you and how they will need to be loved in return. It will show you the level and the amount of attention and affection that this person requires, and it will show you how they will love you and the amount that they're going to send in your direction, If you've got one person whose moon is really watery and emotional and needs a lot of closeness and, needs to know their partner loves them and they want to have that sentimental kind of mushy, romantic bond, then their partner needs to be similar, okay? So, but back to the sun sign thing. If your sun, let's say we're going to use an example. We'll use my sun. My sun's is a really good example. I've got an Aries sun who has a Virgo rising, and he's actually, and his Aries sun is placed in his chart in such a way that he does not feel like an Aries. He's got a Capricorn moon. Capricorn is quite different. Capricorn is ruled by Saturn. It's quite different from Aries. Aries is hot and fiery, and Aries is the warrior. Aries types have this boldness and this braveness to them, and they take chances, and they're risk takers, gamblers, this kind of thing. Capricorn is all about the wisdom that comes with age. That's why it's the old man or the hermit. It's like he knows what happens when you, like the fool on the, the zero of the tarot deck, when you go to walk off that cliff, he knows what's going to happen after you take that step. The fool in the Aries is just in the present moment. Capricorn has stepped off the cliff in the past and knows that when you do that, you're going to fall and get hurt. So how this applies to my son's personality, he's very cautious. His moon is more important than his sun sign. His moon sign tells more about the way he will respond to a situation emotionally, instinctively how he's going to react, what he needs to feel comfortable, safe, secure, etc. If you've got a sun and a moon in your birth chart that are not talking to each other, they're in different elements or they square each other like my son's, then your sun sign may not feel entirely right for you. And especially even more so if that sun is in a house that also is not complementary of the zodiac sign on your sun, like my son's sun. So look at the moon. If sun sign compatibility doesn't make sense for you, then it's more important that you understand the house placement of your sun, meld those energies together. Okay, so if you're an Aries sun, you've got it in the 6th house, combine Aries and Virgo together, for example. That's going to give you more of an idea about your personality or your friend or your lover's personality on the outside. And then look at their moon. Where's their moon placed? What's the zodiac sign? What's the house placement? That's going to give you some serious gold. Not to mention the ruler of the zodiac sign that their moon is in. Look at where that's placed. That's also going to give you some more clues about their personality type, as far as, I shouldn't say personality type, I should say their emotional nature and what they need to feel safe and secure and loved, and how they're going to love you, how they're going to respond to your love cues. Okay, so remember, sun compatibility is good for initial general, to give you a feel for two people, but we want like this marching band where everyone's, you know, playing instruments that are harmonizing with each other and like their uniforms match and stuff, or at least are the same colors. It's a horrible metaphor, but okay. Third reason why sun sign compatibility may seem sort of off for you. All right, this one is a little more subtle. So it's very important to understand the sun sign modality. People who have mutable sun signs, the mutable signs, these are our Geminis, our Virgos, our Sagittarius, and our Pisces, okay? These zodiac signs are what I like to call overridable. So if, for example, you've got a sun that's in a mutable sign, and that sun is conjunct a planet, so it's your sun is conjoining another planet, meaning they're next to each other. So let's say Pluto. Let's say you're a Virgo and you've got a conjunct Pluto. Okay, this is going to sort of overwrite that Virgo mutability because Pluto is a strong energy. It's going to give you more of a Scorpio feel, more of a focused personality type. This would make someone who's probably highly analytical, who wants to study something and has a hard time letting go of whatever they're working on, you know, or someone who can even be obsessive, this kind of thing. It's going to give these qualities of personal power to the personality, some intensity. Also, if that, you know, that sun's also, if that's falling in the 8th house, for example. But it's not just for mutable signs. This is also, if you look at the aspects that are being made to the person's sun. You could even have someone who's a Scorpio. Let's say they're a Scorpio sun, but it's conjunct Neptune. You know, Neptune or even Venus. These have the tendency to sort of soften these stronger, more aggressive energies, more intense, like Scorpio's intense. So you need to look at the planets that are making aspects, and I would look at an orb like less than 1 degree, like really strong aspects, either, you know, conjunct or squaring or trines, yeah, but really more the harder angles, so more conjunctions and squares, because these will flavor that sun, and they can really do a number on how the personality is expressed if they're the closer, you know, Jupiter, Pluto. Jupiter's going to give an expansive quality and optimism to the personality type. You could have, but it also expands whatever touches. So if you was a Scorpio conjunct Jupiter or Scorpio square Jupiter, this could enhance and actually make those Scorpio qualities bigger, and, you know, someone who's even, you know, quite obsessive, or could be someone who moves into paranoia, or you know, just needs to express their power, or exercise, I should say, their personal power. Can be manipulative and dominating and stuff like that. But anyway, so look at the planets making aspects to the sun. Remember, I'll really quickly just go through them. So if it's the moon to the sun, this gives a sort of a Cancerian quality. Okay, moon is Cancer. The moon is the feminine. It's the emotions. It means that this person's personality will be flavored, or will be sort of seen through this emotional lens. Moon also gives a flux, can give a moodiness to the personality. You know, this can be someone who sometimes has a hard time, if it's an opposition even, expressing their ego, their self-will, their emotional nature, like what they need to feel safe, and the way that they express themselves in the world sometimes are in conflict with each other. So people who are born on a full moon can have this energy about them. Within this, though, also lies some tremendous power, because it's the masculine and feminine, the yin and the yang. If you then move to, let's say, Mercury, Mercury is going to give more of a, Mercury is Gemini, and it's also Virgo, but it's this, when I think of it touching the sun, I think of Gemini. Mercury, of course, is the closest planet to our sun, so, and I typically associate Gemini more with Mercury than Virgo, even though, anyway, traditional rulerships and whatnot. But anyway, it's going to give someone more of a cerebral quality. So you could have a water sign of Pisces. If their Mercury makes some sort of an aspect to their sun, they're going to take this spiritual, sort of introverted sort of ability to have compassion and connect with the oneness and have an interest in spiritual things and even escapism. And there's going to be the need to express that outside of themselves, perhaps, to inspire other people, to have conversations or to learn about these things. And it gives a softness to their communication style as well, with Pisces in particular. But Gemini is going to add a quality of the mind, communication, the need to communicate whatever it is that their sun sign, zodiac sign, represents, okay? And then if you're moving on to, so my point being, if you've got someone, for example, who is, let's say Taurus sun, conjunct Mercury, earth sign, then this is an earth sign. This is a person who's a Taurus, yes, but they've got Mercury in there. So they have a higher need for communication and a little bit more of a need for that mercurial contact with other people than the typical earth sign. So typical earth signs, Capricorns and Virgos, might be a little too slow moving for them, or, might not be enough stimulation for them. They might need a little bit more of a mercurial partner. So unless they also have the Sun Mercury thing happening, then there's a compatibility there, okay? Now moving on to, let's say, Venus. With Venus conjunct, or I shouldn't say conjunct, I should say Venus making any type of an aspect in the natal chart to the Sun, you've got someone who has a diplomacy. There's a harmony there. There's the ability to, a sort of a beauty, not necessarily physical, but there's just this sweetness, sweet disposition, okay? And so this is one where probably you're going to sort of jive with, as all things being equal, your sun sign. You're probably not going to have this issue where you're like, oh, I'm an Aquarius, but it doesn't really feel like I like these other signs. Venus isn't going to, it's not going to quite affect this as much as, say, some of the stronger, more malefic planets like Mars or Saturn or Pluto. So speaking of which, moving on to Mars. So Mars gives us a little bit of an aggression to your sun sign. It's like an Aries, Scorpio vibe. So these types, if you're a softer, like a Pisces or like a Cancer, and you have Mars in the mix, there's a need for, you need not conflict, but you need somebody to kind of brush up against. You need someone that you can sort of have a little bit of an aggressive repartee with, and that they're okay with that they can bounce it back at you without feeling hurt. You can also go a little passive aggressive in Cancer, or any of the water signs. But anyway, it's going to feel different. It's going to be a Cancer with, let's say Cancer Sun conjunct Mars. They are going to need a partner that understands their need for a little bit for conflict, or for, in their personal life, they need to prove themselves through sort of fighting for what it is that they want, and they need a partner that understands that. And perhaps the Pisces would be understanding, would be great, and would be fine with that. Perhaps the Scorpio would feel like, there could be a little conflict there where they're competing with one another, or this kind of thing, okay? Moving on to, so Jupiter, like I said earlier, that gives a optimism and expansiveness to the personality, can make someone think that they're greater, better than they are. Overall, it's like Venus, though. It's a benefic. And so really with this one, I'm not going to look at this one so much, but Saturn is important. Saturn aspects to the Sun. Saturn gives a seriousness. It gives a realistic quality, or like the ability to look at something realistically, or i.e. critically, judgmentally, it can be turned inward on the self in a way that the person's hard on themselves. So you have a Sagittarius, say Sagittarius with Saturn conjunct their Sun, let's say. Sagittarius typically is this like optimistic, buoyant personality type, but you put Saturn in there and it's going to give them a little more seriousness. Perhaps they desire to be an expert in the field of teaching, or, some sort of they go into law, you know, and then this person decides to be not just a lawyer, but a judge. And so Sagittarius typically is pretty easygoing personality type. You put Saturn in there, it makes them more serious. So you have someone who typically is kind of more this Peter Pan vibe, typical Sagittarius, who would love to flit around with Aries and Leo, fire signs, right, or the air signs. Put Saturn in there, it makes them a little more serious, and they would desire a partner who's a little more grounded, okay? And this is why they might not feel like the other fire signs quite had it all there for them. Wasn't quite enough. Then moving on to, if you've got someone with Uranus, okay? Uranus making an aspect to the sun, this gives a decidedly Aquarius qualities to someone. Really interesting in relationships. These are people who struggle with this idea of partnership versus the individual self. They have a hard time many times figuring out what partnership's going to look like for them. You know, like they could have multiple different types of partnerships in their lives, but there's like this dissatisfaction, there's this sort of need for freedom that's always bringing them back away from partnership. And so, of course, this can be difficult if you've got someone with an earth sign, let's say, okay, and they've got some sort of an aspect to Uranus. And so it can make the other earth signs look, again, not as appealing, or, you know, or even a water sign, right? Either way. So Uranus is important. Next one, let's look at if we've got Neptune. So Neptune gives to the sun, this is Pisces energy, it can make the identity a little hard to put the finger on. People who have strong Pisces or strong Neptune or strong 12th house, they really can be battered about on the sea of life, like a little boat, when it comes to knowing what it is they want to do with themselves. What's interesting is Neptune to the sun many times gives an alluring, especially if you've got first house and like rising sign stuff happening. It can make somebody really alluring and glamorous. I dated somebody whose Sagittarius sun is conjunct Neptune almost exactly, and he's the Sag rising, his sun's in that first house with Neptune. Very beautiful person, and somebody that other people can sort of project their things upon, but also at the same time is very much his identity would come a lot from his relationships and the person that he's with, and so there's sort of this seeking out of relationships because it gives him a little bit of shape and form. So that can happen with Neptune, and even though he's a Sagittarius and the type of person who, you know, like date multiple people and have lots of different relationships and move into those relationships really quickly because he's Sagittarius, because of his Scorpio moon and this Neptune thing happening, he would, you know, once he's in, he would go really deep. And so anyway, so they can sometimes be attracted to signs, people who perhaps have, you know, water on their sun or their moon, or have them in water houses. Okay, there's going to be a decidedly watery or Piscean or Neptunian thing happening with the partner. And then finally, we've got Pluto. Pluto is powerhouse, even this planetoid now, whatever. This is astrology, not astronomy. So Pluto is so powerful. I mean, it is undeniable in a birth chart. If you've got someone who has strong Pluto to the sun, conjunct, opposite, even trining the sun actually, because Pluto, it gives that person an intensity of their sort of ego, an intensity in the way that they, just their presence even. Pluto is powerful. Pluto has a danger to it and a magnetic, unspeakable, unspoken sort of undercurrent. It's a sexual undercurrent, but it's also it has to do with death. You know, these are people who can bring out in other people jealousy, obsession, manipulation. Someone who's got strong Pluto in their birth chart, they can have these relationships where other people act really weird to them and are jealous of them or jealous of their, you know, relating with the opposite sex or whatever. And the person who has the Pluto to the sun can be kind of confused by that. But it would be like a reoccurring theme, having people who have crushes on you and that kind of thing. Now, they will naturally tend to be attracted to people, those relationships that are actually a little bit more intense, may find themselves attracted to people who have strong water house placements or water on perhaps the moon. There's something that's sort of unconscious in a sense about Pluto. I think of all the sort of watery, like Pluto, or I think of all the water signs or the water houses having this sort of unspeakable, unconscious element to them. And so Pluto also will come out in these relationships where there's an element that's kind of dangerous and obsessive and fated. and like doomed to not work out kind of a thing can kind of happen with someone who's got Pluto Sun. So if you've got like an Aquarius who's got really strong Pluto, you know, we had Libra and Pluto in the 70s. I was born during Libra and Pluto. So let's say you got an Aquarius, Pluto trine their Sun. You know, all things being equal, oops, they probably are attracted to relationships that are a little bit more intense and would need something a little more heavy duty than the typical air sign. So that's my thoughts on that one. Okay. If you have questions or tell me what you think about this, if this is applied to you with your birth chart, if it's right, if it's wrong, and let's talk about it. All right, thanks. Bye.